Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Blow, and I'm with Project Peace. Peace is an acronym, and it stands for Partnering to End Abuse in the Community for Everyone. We're excited to have you here today for our SAAM in the Summer series, with this session being B is for Boundaries, Consent and Intervening on Behalf of Children. Today, we have Jennifer Gross from the Arlington County Department of Human Services and the Child Advocacy Center, and I will let her introduce herself. And just a quick note, we will be taking questions during the presentation, so if you put those in the chat, I will funnel those to Jennifer. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Gross. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in the state of Virginia. I'm also licensed in Maryland, and I'm also a certified sex offender treatment provider, which is a separate license that we have here in Virginia. I have worked in the field of child abuse and neglect for 26 years now. I've worked with victims, non-offending caretakers. I have worked with offenders, convicted offenders in a private practice, doing psychosexual assessments and forensic work with convicted offenders around this issue. And I've done a lot of prevention. The older I get, the more strongly I believe in prevention. So I'm thrilled that you all are here today. First, I want to start by letting everyone know you all were sent some handouts. If you didn't get those handouts, I'm going to be sharing my email address, and if you email me, I will send them to you. But this is a tough topic. It is never easy to talk about child abuse. So I'd like to start by sharing my screen and sharing one of the handouts. I hope everyone can see that. This is a resource sheet specific to Arlington. Now, I know some of you are calling in from or watching from other states and some from other parts of the world. So the basic information that will be shared today on this topic is relevant to every single human being on the planet. The action steps you will take if you think a child or you know a child is being sexually abused is going to vary by what country you're in. And here in the United States and all our territories, it varies state by state. So very quickly, I would just like to stress, because this is such a hard topic, I want to stress over and over and over again, you are not alone. Kids are not alone. Families are not alone. There is a tremendous amount of help available. Professional help, self-help, lots of resources. So for those of you who are outside of Virginia, please be aware these first three resources are available in your state or territory. So Child Protective Services, if you're in Virginia, we have a state hotline. You can call the local department. And if you have, in the United States, there's federal laws that say if you suspect that child abuse may have occurred or is occurring, you have to call Child Protective Services. You're a mandated reporter. Some states, every single person is a mandated reporter. Other states break it down to less categories, but morally and ethically, if you want to call and make a report, you can do that anonymously. So in Arlington County, there's the number. Most police departments or sheriff departments around the United States have, all of them can investigate sex crimes. A lot of departments have special units dedicated with highly skilled and trained investigators when we're talking about assault. And then adult protective services as well. So this is for anyone over the age of 18 who is a vulnerable adult because of some kind of incapacity, disability, or age-related concern. They're the ones to investigate that. So I wanted to list those resources. Now, very importantly, for those of you from other parts of the country, for those of you here from Virginia, and certainly from those of you from other parts of the world, here's two national resources to the US, but Darkness to Light, you can text them, and you can text them from anywhere in the world. These are national lines with trained mental health clinicians who are extremely experienced with issues of child abuse. You can call anonymously, it's 24/7. They can translate calls into, I think, over 250 different languages. So if you're, from Houston, Texas, and you think you're worried about a family in Houston, you can call 1-800-4-A-CHILD or 1-866-4-LIGHT and say, I'm worried about a kid in Houston. How can I get help? If this training triggers something with you, a memory you have of something that happened to you or a loved one or a friend, and you need somebody to process that with and talk to, please feel free to call those hotlines. They're also there for that topic as well, if you need a little help or support or guidance for something that happened with you personally. Couple excellent books that I recommend on the topic. And then this training that I'm going to be offering today is funded by our local Child Advocacy Center, our CAC, where they do phenomenal work, support forensic interviews of kids who may have been abused in some way, shape, or form. And they secured funding that we can offer these trainings for free, which is just excellent. We primarily use the Darkness to Light. That's a company that's trained close to 2 million adults in how to prevent abuse. And today we're going to be doing our bystander intervention training. And but here are some of the other trainings offered through us free of charge. Hopefully we'll be able to do those live again soon. But meanwhile, all of these trainings can be taken online via the Darkness to Light website. They're all available online in Spanish or in English, if you're thinking this would have been great for a coworker or something like that. If you're in the Arlington area, please reach out to me and we can talk about if you're thinking this would be great for my team or this would be great for my, my agency. Give me a buzz and we could help set that up for you, one of these virtual trainings. Outside of this area, on their website, you can find more information. So I wanted to stress this one sheet before we even get started. Okay, Ashley, are there any questions so far? Okay, just checking the chat real quick. All right, so today's format, I'm gonna give a brief introduction to the topic. I know that I'm preaching
Hey,
to—
Jennifer.
Yes.
I'm sorry, quick question. Do you have
Yes.
any presentations that children could view so they could learn this information firsthand?
No, I don't, but I can refer people to that. We more educate adults to intervene in their own kids' lives, whether it's kids you work with or your own children. And I can offer another training about how to talk to kids about sexual abuse, healthy touching, unsafe touching. But one resource I can offer that has a program that's specifically designed for children that's really excellent is the Monique Burr Foundation. They're based out of Florida. Monique Burr, I believe it's B-U-R-R. If you Google their website, their programs are excellent. And what I love about them is they set out some clear guidelines. They don't care if you use their program or not, but I can highly recommend it, but they don't care. They just tell you to look for one that hits all this key criteria that's really important to include in information that's being shared with children. So I hope that answers that question. We don't do a particular class for kids though, here in our CAC. Okay, so why is this topic so important? You wouldn't have signed up if you didn't know it was important. So I'm gonna blow through this information very quickly as a quick refresher and maybe some new information or new thoughts on this for you all. We know that research has shown that child sexual abuse specifically is the largest public health crisis facing our children. We know that 1 out of every 3 or 4 girls and 1 out of every 5 or 6 boys will be sexually abused before they turn 18 years old. Here in the United States, the federal government did a research study, about 10, 15 years ago at this point, that showed that 1 out of every 10 kids will be sexually abused by a school staff member. So I often say to people, what do you think would be happening here in the States if 1 out of every 10 kids broke their arm getting off the school bus? There'd be national protests and lawsuits and everything else. So this is a massive public health crisis. That's the bad news. The good news is we know from solid research over the years and studies that most abuse can be prevented. Most abuse can be prevented. But we have to do that with education and action. And that's what this training is about. We all should know that when a child is sexually abused, 9 out of 10 times, it's the abuse is committed not by the creepy guy in the park or a stranger, but 9 out of 10 times it's someone the child knows, likes, loves, or maybe even lives with. You all should please keep in mind as well that when you're thinking about who might sexually abuse a child, a woman I worked with years ago said this, and it's really resounded with me, that abuse is relentlessly democratic. Both abusers and victims come from every single race, every single religion, every single socioeconomic class, every type of neighborhood, every type of education level, whether you never finish second grade or you have multiple PhDs. Abuse can happen with people who lay around the couch eating Cheetos or people who run marathons. So it's relentlessly democratic of both abusers and victims. And a large percentage of abuse is committed by children on other children. A big percentage of abuse is child on child. So when you're thinking about some of the information we learned today, or watching out for kids in your care or in your social circle, please remember that as well. Most kids don't tell when they're being abused. Most kids don't tell for a whole variety of reasons. And the average age that people do disclose abuse is 52 years old, 52 years old. So we have a lot of kids and adults suffering in silence with shame for something that was not their fault, that they did not deserve. And that's why it becomes so important to prevent this and to get help when needed. Before we slide into the training itself, I want to stress something. I have worked with convicted sex offenders for many, many, many years, almost 20 years. And other research done and studies done with offenders they used to ask convicted offenders, and research tells us only about 6% of offenders are ever caught, and only about 3% are ever convicted of a crime. So if you think about that, that's pretty frightening. The offenders that they do catch and are willing to participate in studies, they used to ask them, tell us about the kids you abused. And some offenders would say, well, they were just there. It was easy, or I was a teacher. But some offenders would say, I looked for kids in this age range that looked like this. So that information was helpful to develop prevention strategies. But more fascinating to me, and what's really shaped a lot of our work in the field, has been they started asking offenders, don't tell us about the people you did abuse. We don't want to hear about them. We want to hear about the people you did not abuse, the people that you targeted in on and you did not abuse them. Why didn't you abuse that person? And the number one answer, if we were here live, I would ask somebody just to shout it out, but the number one answer those offenders gave was they could tell when they targeted a kid or an adult and they didn't abuse them, what stopped them, that there was some protective force in this kid's life, that somebody had talked to this child, that if they said, let's play this game, a kid would say, I don't, my what? My cookie? Do you mean my vagina? Or a kid would say, I'm not allowed to drink that beer. Coach will kill me. Or kids would say, don't text me that kind of stuff. My uncle checks my phone. Or they had another adult come up and say, hey, nice to meet you. I saw you talking to my kid, or I see you're interested in volunteering for us. We run background checks, that kind of thing. When offenders see those things, they move on to some other child or adult who doesn't have that knowledge. So that's heartbreaking, but it also very much motivates me, because it's a clear sign straight from the horse's mouth, if you will, that prevention works. We know it works. So in talking today about bystander intervention, boundaries, and work we can do to step in where needed to get our kids some help, there is another handout that you should have gotten that goes along with this training. And that handout is, let me pull this up. Sorry, I apologize. Okay. Sorry, share screen. You should have gotten this handout as well. This is a handout that goes, we're going to watch a video. I'm going to stop talking, and we are going to watch a video about this. And afterwards, I hope that you all chime in with questions and answers, but this is sort of a guide so you can kick back, relax. You don't have to worry about taking a ton of notes because it's more information is on this sheet than you have that's going to be in this short video. The video is about 20 minutes long, but it goes through the risky behaviors, what steps you can take as a bystander, communicating this information of what you saw with those around you. So again, what I just want to stress is most abuse can be prevented. Abuse is never, ever, ever an accident. Abuse is never an accident. It's always pre-planned. And so that's a horrifying thing as well, but also it should give us all hope because there's clear steps that lead up to when someone's going to commit abuse, and that gives us a chance to intervene before it's happened, or if it is happening, to get that child help sooner. So, Ashley, I'm sorry, I cannot see the chat. Are there any quick questions before I start the video?
I don't see any right now, but I would like to give it a couple seconds so people can process or be able to type those if they do have questions.
Sure. And people can enter questions in as they're watching. And on that resource sheet as well, I've given you my email address. I think my phone number's on there, but you can shoot me an email. I'm happy to follow up with you after this. And please don't forget those two national resources, Child Help and Darkness to Light itself. Both have trained professionals that are there to, if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and really need to talk to somebody about any of this, you can reach out to them as well. But I'm always available as a resource too.
I think you're good to go, Jennifer.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start this video now. It's brief, it's short, and afterwards we'll open it up to questions and thoughts and anything you all want to share. Thank you.
Welcome. This is Bystanders Protecting Children from Boundary Violations and Sexual Abuse. Perhaps you've participated in Darkness to Light's Stewards of Children and you want more. Or maybe this is your first experience with our trainings. As parents, caregivers, and professionals serving youth, protecting children is a top priority. This training teaches us how to be active bystanders in child sexual abuse prevention and response. A bystander is a person who is not directly involved in an interaction, but who senses that something is unsafe. To be a bystander, we don't have to have evidence that someone is unsafe. A gut feeling is enough to get involved. A bystander is also someone who witnesses a boundary violation or sees a situation in which another person is vulnerable.
And a young woman said she saw a kind of alpha male, the tough guy in the school, calling another girl a hoe and a bitch and a lot of names that were words she didn't like and very derogatory in her mind, even though they were common in the school. So she spoke up and said, "I don't like it when you call her that." Now, what's the likelihood that that young man is going to say, "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, I will stop that right now"? Very unlikely. Chances are he's going to turn around and call her that and more, and he did. And he said, "And it's none of your business." To which she said, "You made it my business when you called her that in front of my face." And I had, as I so often have had, an aha moment from a young person. I went, "That's perfect. You made it my business when."
Being an engaged bystander means that harm to another person, especially to a child, is our business. It's a decision to be an advocate, a caring human being, and a member of a community. In the case of protecting a child from sexual abuse, it's saying, I'm the adult who will claim responsibility in this situation for this child's well-being. Put simply, it's a decision to act when we see or suspect harm to a child.
Courage is also a part of this change in our reactions. It takes courage to intervene. It takes courage to stand firmly and endorse boundaries. And it takes courage to do the right thing and choose the child.
It's important that we do intervene. It is our responsibility as a community, as adults, to make sure that we're protecting the children and keeping them safe.
When a child is being sexually abused or groomed for abuse, the child and the person offending are the two least likely people to intervene in their own situation. And yet in the past, our prevention efforts have been aimed at these two people. We've asked children to be aware of and avoid dangerous interactions with people, which so often they're unable to do. And we've increased the legal penalty for those who offend, but this happens only after a child has been harmed. Really, prevention must start with us, the responsible, bystanding adults around those two people.
The statistics are that most children know the person who abuses them. So if you know the child well, you probably know the abuser as well. And so you are the person who is most likely able to see what's going on, have an inkling of what's going on, and be able to intervene.
With child sexual abuse, we see boundary violations and red flag behavior much more often than we see direct sexual contact. So first, we must notice the unsafe behaviors of people who offend, and we have to trust our feeling that something doesn't seem right. The first step to being an effective bystander is noticing what we see and trusting what we feel.
I think some of the behaviors that fell into the gray area or the risky behaviors were things like, you know, he was really touchy-feely. He would always put his arm around me if I was sitting next to him, or put his arm behind me or something like that. I remember one time my grandfather was in town, and he told me, he said, you know, I was really upset. And I said, why? He said, because you ran and sat with Mr. Bob instead of me, and he put his arm around you, and I just thought it was weird. You know, a man who's not in your family kissing you goodnight, it's kind of weird, but, you know, you care about him and you love him, and he says he loves you, so I guess it's okay.
It could be the uncle, it could be the priest, it could be the police officer. These are individuals that gain the parent's trust first. They groom the parent. Once they groom the parent trusts them with their child. And now the grooming process starts on the child also.
Through the grooming process, you're facing escalating abuse, escalating violence, and it's you know, being alternated with rewards. Your uncle comes over, you sit on, you know, he asks you to sit on his lap, you sit on his lap, he gives you love, and that feels really good, and then the next day he comes over, you sit on his lap, he gives you love, and that feels really good, but then he puts his hand on your leg, right? And then you go out for ice cream. You know, the next day he comes over, you sit on his lap, he puts his hand a little bit further up your leg, you go out for ice cream after. You know, you're getting the positive reinforcement, you're getting the love from him, the attention that you want, you're getting an ice cream. And then as it goes on and he tests his boundaries and he sees, okay, she's not going to tell on me, she's not going to resist this, or, you know, might feel uncomfortable, but she's not running away from this because you're blurring the boundary.
The parent should know that they are being groomed. Are they spending time with me so they can spend time with my child? The individual who calls up for the date, takes you on a date and says, the next date, let's take your little baby, let's take little Johnny or little Mary to the zoo, right? So they start using that parent to get to the child.
He's setting you up to think that you owe him, because he would be our babysitter a lot of times, and you know, he was great at that, and he would be in our home while we were away doing things, and he would fix dinner for them and just do a lot of fun stuff. We could almost call him kind of late, and he'd be happy to come and do all these things, and I think that it was like, you know, you owe me, so you need to let me do these, whatever I want to do now.
One of the big things was with Mr. Bob, the only rule that there was is that there were no rules.
think one of the ways that he eased us into the abuse was like, what kid doesn't want to run around naked? You're not supposed to do it, so let's do it.
He had this big stack of speeding tickets, and at Christmas in class he would take up a collection from everybody who had gotten the speeding ticket taken care of to buy the lady at the court a Christmas present. Letting you and everybody else know he was able to do things, special rules applied.
Things like someone who is really intensely child-focused, somebody who spends all of their time with children or seems to, latch on to one particular child. That would be a behavior that would be concerning.
They're getting that child to stay after school and get one-on-one work with their homework.
People taking children home, we have that happen sometimes, taking them home on the weekends, or, I'm going to babysit for the parent, they're late, I want to take them home. So that's a red flag.
When you have an adult texting or emailing a younger person, that ought to raise at least some curiosity. And I'm talking about not in the course of a teacher providing some coursework information, but I'm talking about texting and the content is personal.
Children do come up and hug, because children like to hug, and so that happens. But I think if it's more initiated by the adult a lot of times, like, give me a hug, versus a child doing it on their own, that's a red flag sometimes, if it's consistent.
I would be concerned about an adult taking pictures of an individual child, period. There would really be no reason for an adult to be taking personal photos of an individual child. Yes, the group shot of the basketball team, that makes total sense, but taking a picture of one child, I would think that would be concerning. We notice these behaviors and we trust the gut feelings we have. The next step is feeling responsible to get involved. Sometimes this means recognizing our fears or the excuses we make to avoid doing something. If we can spot these fears, we can make a choice to get past them.
Generally, in our culture, adults' rights trump children. So we believe the adults over the children, and we tend to think more about the impact on the adult than on the child. We think about the disruption to this person who harmed the child's life, career, and reputation more than the trauma to the child.
Fear of losing their job. Fear of, am I going to get too involved? Is something going to happen to me? Is something going to happen to my family because I blew the whistle?
And we also get really confused. This could be a really wonderful father or stepfather or mother or brother or sister. But if they are sexually abusing, they need to stop doing that. And we have a hard time holding on to those two truths.
And I think that's where most of us are really challenged, because it's really hard to set boundaries with other adults. It's a lot easier for us to set boundaries with children. And so we tend to like to talk to our kids about things, what's okay, what's not okay, what people shouldn't do to them, but we don't want to take it to the step of actually talking with the adult whose behavior is concerning.
Culturally, many of us believe we shouldn't get involved in other people's business, or that's not my child, so I shouldn't say anything. Part of the risk we've got to be willing to take is to speak up and to intervene at times when it might be uncomfortable, when we may not know what the outcome is going to be. And so that's part of the decision, a conscious decision to be willing to take risk.
To stand up on behalf of a child, we have to take some risks. As strong bystanders, our values and our compassion carry more weight than our fears. And so we get involved.
In this work, people say trust your gut. And I think that's actually a great guideline in general, because I think it's like there's certain situations that make you uncomfortable, and we often don't know why we're uncomfortable, but that's the thing to sort of be watching for.
There are two kinds of interventions that a bystander can make. One is a spontaneous, on-the-spot intervention, and the other is a planned intervention. In a spontaneous intervention, we see something or have a gut feeling, and we act to protect the child right there in the moment.
I think an example where a coworker could call another coworker on behavior would be things like inappropriate language. You know, if you overhear another coach, you know, swearing in front of children, that'd be a great place for, you know, another adult to say, hey, you know, keep it PG, or we don't use that kind of language around here.
Another person told me that whenever they would go to family parties, that her husband would take pictures, and he was like the family photographer. But when they got the pictures back, there always tend to be more pictures of the girls and the young girls in the family than of anybody else, and that always made her uncomfortable, but didn't think anything of it. So those are the kinds of things that I would say to be careful of. And when you see those, don't be afraid to talk about them.
You know, a child has skunned their knee and needs a Band-Aid, and so one adult takes the child into the first aid room and gets a Band-Aid. You know, that's outside the policy because it's the one-on-one, but it seems pretty innocuous. That'd be the kind of thing I think a coworker could call another coworker on, or a parent could call a coach on.
It could be simply that, you know, that someone loves tickling little kids, but they do it to the point where the kid's not necessarily enjoying it. Do I think that's suspecting child sexual abuse? No, but this is someone who doesn't necessarily understand boundaries and how it's important for children to set boundaries. So I would say that's something which is important to intervene for a couple of reasons. One is to tell that relative that this is something which is clearly making your child uncomfortable. So it models for your child how to have that conversation. So I would say it's great to do that right at the moment, right in front of your child. You know, say, well, I didn't mean anything about it. Like, of course you didn't mean anything about it. And that's why I'm saying something to you, because I care about you and I care about my daughter. It also sets a very clear message that this is a family with boundaries. And so if, in a worst case scenario, that person is someone who is planning on sexually abusing a child in your home, you've made it very clear that this is not a safe home to do that in.
What we really advocate is describe the behavior, set a limit, and move on. I mean, and ideally, a lot of situations can be that simple. Hey, you know, our policy is no closed doors. You know, I saw you yesterday with Sally and the door was closed. Remember, you can't close the door when you're with the kids. Start there.
For spontaneous interventions, describe the behavior to the person who is crossing the boundary, set a limit, or offer a more appropriate solution for that person and move on. Moving on means that we refrain from making a scene or becoming highly emotional. It also means move to the solution. Make sure that the person who has violated the boundary is willing to follow the limit you've set. If not, remove the child to a safer situation.
It doesn't mean the person has any intention whatsoever of doing something wrong. But you're still saying, here's the boundary, you're crossing the boundary, please stop.
In a planned intervention, our actions may take place over a period of time and should include conversations with the person. We describe the problematic behavior and reinforce the child's boundaries.
I care about you, that's why I want to raise this, but I'm concerned about the fact that whenever we're at a wedding, that you always comment about how hot the 13-year-old girls are. Well, that makes me uncomfortable, and it also makes me wonder why you're looking at the 13-year-old girls, and is there something that we should be talking about? If you can talk about it from a perspective, I'm saying something because I care about you, and to say these are the behaviors that I'm concerned with, that's actually the best way of actually beginning a conversation.
When a parent has any kind of concern about, say, a neighbor wanting to spend time alone with their child, that it's appropriate to say something to that neighbor that can be both positive and limit setting. And so the positive would be, Johnny really enjoys spending time with you, and I appreciate your interest in him. And I've just taken this course about what I need to do to protect my child from spending a lot of time alone with somebody. And so I guess I've just gotten really cautious. And so I'm gonna restrict some of Johnny's time with you. But one of the outcomes of that is you were saying to this person, I'm informed, I'm knowledgeable, I'm aware, and I'm vigilant. And in this business, we call that hardening the target, Because then the neighbor may say, oh, this person is alert, and it probably isn't wise for me to pursue this child.
Sometimes bystander intervention is a process that involves several people.
The kids were at a community pool with her, kind of a grandparent, and she decided that it would probably be a good idea to put the kids in the shower together and wash them down after being in, the chlorinated pool and that type of thing, and to jump in with them at that same point. We just felt that it was completely inappropriate, for a 60-year-old woman to be bathing with, a 6 and 8-year-old child in the shower. I mean, we're their parents, and we don't do that. So we just felt that it was just a really bad choice on her part. So my daughter was the one who actually told us all of everything that had gone on, and we asked her, did Grandma touch you in any place? Did she try to make you touch her in any place, or anything like that? And she said no, that none of that happened. But, still the situation or the vulnerability of her being in that situation was just completely unacceptable to us. So we had that conversation with both of the kids that was a very inappropriate choice on her part, and that, that should never ever happen again. And if it does, you have that right to say, well, I'll wait until you're finished and then I'll go next, or I'd rather do this in private. It was a very awkward and uncomfortable time, but it was something that had to be done for our children, to let her know how inappropriate it was. There was a lot of trying to sweep it under the carpet at first, which did not sit well with me. And we had discussed it, and she said, well, I'll take care of it, because I know that, you're not going to be as diplomatic as I will with this, and this is my father's wife, so it really should be on me. So, it was several meetings. It was several sit-downs. Unfortunately, it wasn't a one-time, thing. Meetings at restaurants to discuss this, meeting at the house to discuss it, and then limitations were set down. Would we allow them to watch our children any longer? Would we need to be present if that be the case? And we kind of used all of those steps to put back into place that, okay, I'll bring the kids back around, but I'll stay with them and visit with you. We made her gain our trust back. I've kind of met my peace with it, and we're moving forward, and I think that's very important too. Would I allow my children to be around her again? Unfortunately not. If they are going to be around her, it will be either in the company of either my wife or myself.
Take a moment to write it down, what you heard, and keep a journal of all this, because in your worst, if this is actually a problem, that what I found is that often we can forget what happened last week. Write every incident that you're concerned about down, so that if, again, you need to either have a second conversation or you need to make a report, you have that information right there. If the person that you want to talk to has a tendency towards violence, absolutely don't do this alone. And if they have a tendency towards violence, you may not want to have that conversation at all. So it's okay to say, this is not someone I can talk to about it, and I have enough concern here that I'm going to say this person can't be either in my home, or you may want to say, I'm not going to leave this person alone ever with my child. And that's something that you not only you decide for yourself, but you tell your partner, you tell anybody else in the family. As long as my sister is dating this guy and is part of our family, I want to make sure that my children are never alone with that person. And if you really have a deep concern, you should report it. Sometimes the conversation is not what you need to have. If you really are, if you really suspect that somebody has sexually abused a child, make that report. Do nothing should not be an option. If you say nothing, it models the behavior for your child that the silence is what you are allowing in that house, and that it creates a void that your child is going to be more difficult for your child to actually say something.
When we intervene on behalf of children, we not only change the course of the immediate problem, but we change social norms. We model courage for other bystanders. We reinforce to children that we'll protect them, and we set firm standards for the person who's crossing boundaries. Our courage has that far-reaching of an effect.
It feels great. It really just feels absolutely wonderful, and there's nothing else to me in the world that could make up for that feeling.
Thank you for being a strong bystander, standing up for children, and ending child sexual abuse.
Yes, we
Okay, I'll give you guys a second to process what you just saw. And I'm gonna look through the chat a little bit, but I would like to encourage everyone, please feel free to take yourselves off mute. I think you can do that. And if you just want to ask your question, please ask or share your thoughts about what you saw. I'm seeing questions about the handout. So if you didn't get them, could you please email me or Ashley directly? I think once we close this chat, we're not going to have access to the email addresses that people put in, but Ashley, please correct me if I'm wrong about that. But if people can email me directly, I'm happy to send those handouts. And my email address is jm, like Marie, jmgross, Gross, so that's all one word with no punctuation, jmgross at arlingtonva.us. And I just saw Ashley put in the chat that she sent them out. Thank you, Ashley, for putting my email address in there. Please feel free to email me directly if you haven't gotten them yet. And thank you, Ashley, for emailing people there. So would anybody like to share any thoughts or questions or feedback on what we just saw? Give you guys a second for that, but you can please feel free to unmute yourself. You don't have to start your video if you don't want to, but please feel free to unmute yourself if you want. And while I'm giving a few people some time to think, I would again just like to say that all these videos are on Darkness to Light's website. That's d2l.org, d2l.org. And those videos, I think that these supplemental sessions, there might be a charge for them. I think it's like $5. They're there for Spanish or English. And then the training I would really recommend for you all is the Stewards of Children. That's a 2-hour training that takes a more comprehensive look at this whole entire issue. And you can take that for free if you type in the code flip the switch. If you Google Stewards of Children, flip the switch, they'll give you a code to take that one for free in Spanish or in English. So I'm seeing a question that there is a leader of a Girl Scout troop with education for kids 5 to 9. What would I recommend? You're in Florida, that's good news. The Monique Burr Foundation is right in Florida. They're phenomenal, and I would reach out to them. Oh, Ashley, you're amazing. Oh, sorry, the program out of Florida is called, thank you for clarifying that you're in Maryland. I would still recommend that you check their website to get their recommendations on what to look for in a good program. And if you can access their program, I think you can get trained online and access their information online. They're a good, solid group, and you can rely on their recommendations. I can also recommend we offer another training similar to this, about an hour long, about talking to kids about sexual abuse. Don't do that with kids unless that's your job, they're your own kids, or you've gotten some sort of permission and authorization from parents. But we do offer a class on talking to kids about healthy touching and how to recognize healthy touching and when it could slide over into inappropriate or abusive. And we do offer a class on how to talk to kids about abuse as well, so that they're educated on this topic. Darkness to Light does, and we offer that training for free, either virtually or when we can in person. So as I'm watching to see if other, how do you determine whether or not a hug is appropriate? A couple quick things. If you're a professional, if the children initiate a hug, well, let me start by saying this. We don't want kids to be raised in a world where no one's touching them. That's neglect, and that can have very far-reaching repercussions, negative repercussions for kids' development and growth. Kids and adults need physical affection. They need that for healthy growth. And so we would never recommend not having physical affection with kids. It's very damaging. So the basic guidelines in a nutshell for watching, you know, and again, this ties in with bystander, right? If you see a teacher or you see somebody hug a kid, is that grooming or is that normal? Where do you go with this? So what we determine is if it's in a professional situation, lots of time kids will initiate a hug. My boys are older now, but when they were kids, I was volunteering at lunch, and all the kids, it was indoor recess because it was raining. Kids ran into the classroom after lunch, and several of the kids ran over to the teacher, hugged her. They initiated it. She patted them on the back. She shuffled them off. Hey, don't forget Connect 4 is over there. Hey, do I put the art supplies out? And I thought it was really nice. You know, and I know a lot about this topic. The kids initiated it. The teacher patted them on the back, shuffled them off. I didn't think twice about it. Now, when I investigated child abuse as a million years ago, when I first started out, I worked on a case one time where a teacher forced every kid who came in the room, they had to hug her. They had to hug her. And clearly a lot of the kids were uncomfortable. One the child initiated was spontaneous, initiated, teacher handled it appropriate, and it ended. Another one grossly inappropriate and wrong. So how do we determine if a hug is appropriate or not? You know, who initiated it, how long it lasted. But I would also stress to all of you when you're thinking about anything, language, words used, or anything, the acronym PAN, like a frying pan. Is it public? Was it appropriate? And was it non-sexual? Was it public, appropriate, and non-sexual? And if you ever have the slightest doubt, please call a local authority. Please call the local CPS. You can call anonymously and run situations by them. But so could it ever be appropriate for a staff member in a school to be alone with a naked child? You know, most of you are like, what? What is she even saying? Do you know what? Quite frankly, it might be. If you teach preschool, somebody's always with a naked kid. Somebody's throwing up, somebody's wetting their pants, somebody spilled the juice all over themselves. We send our kids with clothes, with extra clothes to preschool because kids are jumping in mud puddles, you know? So maybe that it might be appropriate. They have a plan in place for that, but would it ever be appropriate for a school staff member to be alone with a naked 12-year-old? Absolutely not. So that comes into the appropriate part, age appropriate. Could it be appropriate for a kid to sit on, you know, a staff member's lap if they're 4 and they fall on the playground, or 5 and they fall on the playground and they run over to the teacher or the volunteer and jump on their lap? If the person gives them a quick hug, brushes their knee off and sends them off, that could be appropriate. It was public, it was appropriate, it was non-sexual. But for a 14-year-old boy to be sitting on the lunch volunteer's lap, absolutely not. So again, we're talking here about continuums. And again, somebody's made a comment that a lot of this is cultural. Absolutely, absolutely. I've, you know, in a lot of cultures, perfect stranger, you give them a kiss on one cheek, you give them a kiss on another cheek. In other cultures, you wouldn't ever do that. So again, there's lots of different considerations to be taken in, but a key thing I'll stress to you, they said in the video, and this is why I list this book as one of the 2 resources, the gift of fear, that gift of fear. If you get a bad feeling that something's not right, pay attention to that. Grab onto it with both hands and don't let go until you figure out what it is. It's a warning sign. And in virtually every single case I've ever been involved with, from working with kids who are abused, to non-offending caretakers, to adult survivors, to the offenders themselves, somebody noticed something along the way and then talked themselves out of it. Because we say to like, oh, I'm paranoid, or I've been watching too much Law and Order. Don't. And that's a key thing when you're talking to kids too. We have to talk to kids. We used to only talk to kids about good and bad touch. That was a huge mistake, because a touch can feel physically good. If someone's rubbing my shoulder, that feels nice. If someone's, you know, doing that. But if it's somebody who physically it may feel nice, but my stomach's in knots. So we want to talk about good, bad, and uncomfortable. And we 100% want to stress to kids a great time to talk to a trusted adult But this goes for adults too, right? The perfect time to talk to another person to get some help is when you feel uncomfortable, because that's often the very first warning sign that something's slid out of normal and appropriate over into perhaps this is grooming or leading up to something else. So we have a few minutes left, and I'm happy to follow up. I encourage you all to look at the worksheet with the questions. It'll be a little bit thought-provoking for you all to ask yourselves those questions, jot down some thoughts, you know, and play around with this information. That I think the handouts will be a good resource for you because it lays out in a clear format everything that we've talked about today. So let me just, you know, see if anybody else, will I be doing more of these trainings? I would absolutely love to do more of these trainings. We in Child and Family Services, Project Peace hosted us today, so a big shout out to them. They're a phenomenal group, and the amount of work the people who do in Project Peace to educate, provide services is phenomenal. So a huge thank you to them. And I'm here, as we're all Arlington County employees, I'm here from Child and Family Services. So if you want to reach out to me, shoot me an email. We're going to be scheduling more of these online on a regular basis. And I'm happy to talk to people directly about setting up individual trainings for small groups or for staff members. And we can really tailor it then. We have a mixed group of professionals and parents here, but if it's a group of all teachers or all nurses or all therapists or all parents, we can really tailor the conversation to fit your particular circumstance better. So please, please reach out to me. My email is in the chat and it's on the resource sheets as well. And I would be absolutely happy to talk to you about that. And I would be happy to send you a link to our main Sign Up Genius page, but I haven't posted new dates yet. But we're going to be offering all these these 4 supplemental trainings. This one again, bystander, the talking to kids about sexual abuse, healthy touching, and we also have one on commercial exploitation of kids. And then the main training for the stewards of children, which I would, if you all enjoyed this, you will love, love, love the whole full-blown stewards of children. That's 2 hours long. And that for anybody here licensed in mental health, stewards of children, or if you're a dentist or a hygienist, that comes with free CEUs as well, the stewards of children. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We have a couple minutes for other feedback or information. So throw those questions in there, reach out to me on the side, and please, please, please don't forget that you can text the Darkness to Light helpline or call them anonymously or with your full information. They're for personal issues or professional questions. If you're thinking about a family that needs some help and you're not sure what to do, both those national hotlines are available 24/7. And in the United States, regardless of where you're logging in from, every locality and state and territory has Child Protective Services and police or sheriff's department that can help out with these situations. Never hesitate to call. Thank you all so much. I know this is a tough topic, but I absolutely love doing prevention because although this is overwhelming and can be a little bit scary, the phenomenal good news, and it's not just me being Pollyanna, the research proves this out. Most abuse can be prevented, and that's exciting. And the more people that we bring on board with this, the easier that's going to get. So thank you all so much. I know how busy everybody is, and I really appreciate your being here today. Thanks for the feedback and thanks for the questions.
Thank you again, Jennifer, for this awesome presentation. Thank you to everyone who showed up. As I put in the chat, we will be posting this video for folks that missed it, if they came in late or if they have colleagues that would like to see it. So I will follow up with that in an email as well as an evaluation. And don't forget, we still have the rest of SAAM in the summer for the rest of the week. Tomorrow we have Dating During COVID, and on Friday we have Call Me and I'll Be There, Lessons Learned from Mobile Advocacy. So we hope that you can join us for those. Those registration is available on Eventbrite. And again, thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you, Ashley. It's a real pleasure. Thank you.